Operating as though enforcement only matters if you're caught doing something is kind of a high risk way of operating. Don't make decisions based on what you see other people doing. Make decisions based on proper interpretation.
Hey everyone, this is Nazar Akil from Max Pro.
Hi, I'm Linda.
And I'm Paul.
And we're 11 Pebbles.
Hi, this is Lopa Vandermersch from Rasa.
And you're listening to
And you are listening to the E-Comm Show.
Welcome to the E-Comm Show, presented by BlueTuskr, the #1 place to hear the inside scoop from other e-commerce experts, where they share their secrets on how they scaled their business and are now living the dream. Now, here is your host, Andrew Math.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the E-Comm Show. I'm your host, Andrew Math, and of course, super excited for today's show. I'm joined by the amazing and super famous Chris McCabe of EcommerceChris. Chris, how you doing? You ready for a good show?
And also, I'm really good looking. Don't forget that.
You are very attractive.
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So you've been in the industry for a very long time, but I still would like to pretend that no one knows who you are. So Why don't you give everyone a little bit of insight into your background, where you've been, where you're at, where you're going, and we'll kind of kick it off from there.
Sure. Short version. If you haven't been irritated by my voice in the past on a podcast or in person at a conference, I'm ex-Amazon, ex-Seller Performance as it's known. I've been in the account reinstatement and listing takedown / reinstatement appeal space for 7 years. Worked at Amazon for 6 before that. So kind of on and off Amazon for the last 14 years or so. Worked there in Seattle, moved back to the Boston area, which is where I'm from. I would say roughly a year after leaving Amazon, maybe several months after living in New York. But consulting was a natural fit because I'm consulting on all the issues I used to deal with when I worked for Amazon. So evaluating seller account performance, third-party marketplace expertise. We don't do vendor or first-party so much. We deal with policy violations, performance notifications that sellers can't figure out how to counter or assess. We do policy work, and then we do performance evaluation as well. So it's kind of a one-to-one relationship to my job when I worked at Amazon.
Beautiful. Yeah. So EcommerceChris, obviously your business, is that more of a consultancy, or do you actually go and actually execute some of the suggestions and requirements that you tell these sellers?
It's a consultancy. We're not full account management, full service agency. And we kind of stick to where our areas of expertise reside, which is appeals strategy. I mean, we do conduct appeals strategy, but we also help write appeals for sellers. We're not just coaching them through doing it themselves. I do have 1-hour consults for people that really want to do it themselves and really think they've got the right strategy for it. That's fine. The right perspective. The rest of it is really we're hired out on project work for reinstatement appeals through to completion until the account's reinstated. Amazon loves to play games in terms of, well, we didn't read it, we didn't like it, maybe they read it, maybe they didn't. They're very, very vague in their communication. It's deliberate, I would say. But most sellers that haven't been through that process before, even many that have and are reluctant to go through it again, understand that Amazon's got a language all of its own. It's not just jargon and terminology. It's also just strategy, which is kind of a my way or the highway when it comes to Amazon. And when they reject appeals, they almost never give you clear indications of why. Mm-hmm. And they give even less guidance on what needs to change or be done next. I mean, they kind of do with account health teams, but a lot of that's sort of, smoke screen and window dressing. It's not really competent, high level help as numerous sellers would agree because they tell us this every day. So
yeah. You're definitely, I've I don't know if I've worked with you, but I've definitely known you in the industry for 6-7 years at this point, from way back when. Mm-hmm. And you've always been like the guy to know, because especially when it comes to like account reinstatements and you're dealing with appeals and all that kind of stuff,
right?
No one has that skill set, and they don't even know that they need that skill set until it's too late. And then they come to you in a panic.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do you see are some of like the common things that sellers do, if they're going to appeal like a listing getting taken down, or maybe the entire account got suspended, or what's the common mistakes that they make?
Poorly written appeals, misunderstanding what kind of appeal is required. So sometimes the nature of their appeal or their response is way off from what was asked or what was expected.
Yeah.
That's one issue, is just misinterpretation of what you're being asked for. Secondly, I guess I'll give you the top three. Secondly would simply be people that don't like writing or don't feel like doing it and just cast about on the forums or Facebook groups and ask around for templates. And then they just try to copy and paste their way to success and happiness. That pretty much never works. I every so often hear from a seller who tells me that, like, I copied and pasted my buddy's or my friend's appeal and it totally worked and it was great. Those are like maybe 2, 3, 4% of the time they're successful. I mean, if you're happy with those odds, then great. It's kind of the same as people who write escalations to the Jeff at Amazon, the old escalation path from years ago that gets read by just some run of the mill staff, employee at Amazon. I mean, we used to have to be certified to answer the Jeff emails, and it was only a small, tight crew of us that were handling those. Now everyone writes to Jeff. People send everything under the sun. Common mistake. I mean, I know searching around, you get, hey, write to Jeff. It's very outdated, antiquated advice. So people are still doing that, unfortunately. And I would say the rest of the complaints or mistakes we see people making is just not being prepared. No supply chain documentation, unacceptable, irrelevant supplier info or supply chain documentation. Amazon asks you for a letter of authorization, and you just throw some retail receipt at them, or your supplier doesn't even have a website. I mean, that's grounds for an automatic denial if your supplier doesn't have a website. So for us, that's kind of easy to grasp information, but a lot of sellers don't even know that. So I guess I would say the third most common is just not being aware, not being tuned in or hooked into the community enough, or you're reading the wrong blogs, listening to the wrong people. It's not just me. I mean, there are a lot of services pretending to be experts at reinstatement appeals. The problem is, if you want to pretend to be an expert, you also have to produce a lot of content, videos, and articles that make you look like you're an expert and make it sound like you know what you're talking about. And I don't really read or listen to that stuff anymore, but I occasionally get links to these things, and I'll see that they're just regurgitating content they found someplace else, or it's just very vague and unclear, and they're just kind of faking it. So it's up to the seller. I mean, you can't blame every lukewarm service out there for trying to create a side hustle. That's always going to exist. You have to kind of blame yourself for not hiring well and vetting services properly. Some people are out there that are good at this that didn't work at Amazon, but obviously if you can find people that worked on the seller performance teams, that's a good place to start.
Yeah. I say there's not very many of you out there.
Right.
And if there are, not many of them are offering the service, obviously. So that's kind of your clear differentiators that you've been there, it.
They come and go. They come and go. Yeah.
Yeah. Years ago, the appeal process, all that stuff was a nightmare. Amazon would flag you for anything under the sun. Now I think they've gotten a little bit better with it. And I'm not hearing as many like just random suspensions because they hit the wrong button or something like that. But how have you kind of seen things evolve from, where they were several years ago to kind of where they are now with that whole process?
So it's a mixture of better and worse. I think the messaging is worse. It's definitely murkier. We're seeing a huge spike in messages that have empty brackets, or it'll say dear, and it's like not even you. It's another seller's name. So we're seeing a huge increase in right-click errors or non-modified messages, which just make the appeals process so much harder. It's embarrassing to Amazon. It's a sign of no auditing, no quality assurance, and it's making the competency of the teams called into question. But the better part, like you mentioned, is account health reps reach out to you before you're suspended more often now than they did, let's say, 4 years ago. So at least you have a hint that it's coming. It's not quite as lightning strike as it used to be. That being said, there are still plenty of sellers that get suspended out of nowhere. That hasn't gone away. Yeah. It's just less likely. It's just less often that happens.
Yeah.
But we found it's sort of an interesting psychology to selling. We found that sellers still complain like, they suspended me and don't tell me why. We still get that as much as we used to. Often we look at the messaging and we just tell them, well, it says right here why. But everyone's kind of knee-jerk reaction is in their brain, they're thinking like, they didn't tell me, or I had no warning of this. And then if we're like working with them and we get into what kind of warnings did you get or notifications did you receive? Well, we did get something a month ago. Like you get more detail to the story.
Yeah.
And it turns out there were plenty of breadcrumbs. It's just that they either didn't see it or they outsourced the management of their account to some agency that didn't take it seriously, or they did read it and they didn't know what to do with it. And so they just stuck where they were. And we're like, well, we'll figure it out another day because right now we don't know what to do about it. So
yeah. A lot of the services and consulting, obviously, that you offer is relatively, I guess I would say, offensive, right? Something happens, you have to make a play, you have to do something to try to get it resolved. Do you do anything or provide any guidance on more of a defensive side of things to help sellers on like put things into place that will keep them from getting suspended or listing suppressed?
Yeah, a lot of people, and I can give you a couple examples. A lot of people commit listing violations just because they either don't know or don't understand listing policies. Sometimes they have us look over, random selection of listings. We find some violations, pointing those out, getting them to correct them, telling them why they have to correct them. Best example would be ASIN variations. Anyone who's miscreating or improperly creating ASIN variation groups or themes. Mm-hmm. Very common cause of an account suspension or a warning for listing violations. So if you can catch that before you even get the warning, obviously you don't have a strike against your record for breaking policy. Yeah. Then there's just sourcing or, as I mentioned, a lack of sufficient supply chain documentation, a lack of compliance documentation, testing from ISO certified labs. It depends on what kinds of products you have, of course, but a lot of people just aren't prepared to show who their supplier is or why they're an established or reliable manufacturer or supplier of those kinds of products. There's just a dearth of information about the supplier themselves. Maybe they do have a website, but it doesn't really say anything. It's just a placeholder. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you do have supply chain documentation like invoices, but they don't really look professional or they're not complete. And I think sellers just, we can point these flaws out before it becomes a huge headache because sellers don't really understand that it can't just be, hey, we got an invoice. Well, is it an acceptable invoice that'll pass Amazon's strict, aggressive verification process? Because don't take that for granted. I think sellers at this point in history know not to take their eyes off of Amazon for too long. The enforcement teams, like you kind of know the threat's looming. But at this point, shouldn't be taking those types of teams for granted because it's cyclical, right? Every so often there's a trend or a fad like, hey, we're going to investigate this, or we're going to ask people about that, or we're going to demand this kind of documentation, or we're going to crack down on this metric. Like, keep in mind that these things don't just go away forever. They cycle back around.
Yeah. Obviously, we do a lot of listing stuff here, more on a marketing side. And, we'll come across relatively similar situations where there's something we kind of want to say, but we know that we probably shouldn't based on Amazon's TOS and certain rules they have in place. Yeah. But then we always have this issue where, we might have someone turn around and be like, yeah, but my competitor is saying this. And I'm going to bet that you get that a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So what is your response to, basically that situation of, you're just because someone's doing it doesn't mean they're right?
Amazon, well, first of all, if you show examples of, hey, why are you busting me? What about all these guys? That two wrongs don't make a right to Amazon. Amazon would say, oh, okay, so you're reporting them. So in addition to you, we should take them down too. That would be the reaction. Not, that we're letting them do it so you can do it too. Operating as though enforcement only matters if you're caught doing something is kind of a high risk way of operating. Don't make decisions based on what you see other people doing. Make decisions based on proper interpretation of policy. Whether it's fair, whether you want to debate why other people get away with it and you don't. Amazon never really promises the public that they'll consistently enforce. They might promise it, but they don't do it. And that might not ever change. Yeah. So accept from the beginning that enforcement will be inconsistent. Things will be missed. Internal policy team infrastructure and operation will be haphazard and disorganized. And it's been that way because teams are so siloed at Amazon. They're famous for that. Mm-hmm. I mean, Amazon teams aren't known for communicating well with each other internally, so they probably won't be able to communicate with sellers or with any external party any better than they can communicate with each other. Lots of things are left to fester and not fixed. Lots of passing the buck, lots of transferring things around. I remember even when I was working there, sometimes things would be transferred in a loop all the way back to the original person, because nobody wants to take responsibility for that sort of stuff. If they can find an excuse to hand it off, they'll do it. Yeah. So don't make any decisions based on what you see live on the site. What you see live on the site this minute might be gone in 10 minutes. It might not have been flagged yet, or it could be gone tomorrow, right? I mean, when sellers get suspended, all their listings come down. You might have a competitor on a particular page. You see them today, they're gone tomorrow. It's the same thing with a listing that breaks policy. You might be, just because you're looking at it live right now, doesn't mean it belongs there, and it doesn't mean it'll be there in 5 hours. So
that's a very good point.
Yeah.
You've obviously been doing this for very, very long time.
Too long.
Plus you were internal at Amazon. Like, obviously you are clearly the guy to go to from this. And and at the same side of that, kind of a double-edged sword of, you obviously don't really want Amazon to fix too many of these problems, because that's obviously where you get to come in. But do you see it at any point in the near future getting any easier for sellers to actually be able to submit tickets and get, some kind of information back that's a little bit more detailed around what the issues are, instead of these templated emails that they're getting?
Yeah. And by the way, I mean, we do hope that someday there will be no need for people like us. We're expecting to be extinct at some point, either because sellers up their game to the point where they don't need this kind of help, or Amazon finally cleans up their act, or you meet somewhere in the middle where we're needed for some things but not others. But I welcome that, because we've had to offer more and more services, not fewer services over time, because there's more things going wrong as the marketplace scales up and as more sellers join and more people create brands. In the future, all I can say is we can only control our side, not Amazon's side. And on our side, we know that sellers could greatly improve how they pursue different types of listings, different kinds of products, how they respond to warnings. Hopefully Amazon eventually allocates more resources to some of these areas, but the messaging is getting muddier. Response times are all over the place. I mean, I'm not that hopeful that Amazon can clean up their act. I mean, sometimes with one particular problem, they will fix it. I mean, like A+ content loopholes used to be gigantic, and those have diminished. Vendor central based async contribution abuse used to be a horrible thing. I mean, that's improved a little bit over the years, but it's the same as anything else. Like, one door closes, another one opens up. We're never seeing the point where every problem's being worked concurrently at the same time with the same amount of progress month in, month out, so that we can project into 2023 or 2024 and say, you know what? In 18 months, I think they're going to have 6 out of these 8 major brand pain points fixed based on today's progress. I hope I can say that in a couple of years. I don't see it unfolding that way, because when it comes to e-commerce marketplaces, Amazon's a monopoly. I don't care what they say in public statements about antitrust. They do what they want for a reason. They run the marketplace they want the way they want for a reason. It's because they're not feeling too much pressure from government regulatory bodies, from the seller community, from the media. They feel a little bit, but it's trendy and it's cyclical, right?
Yeah.
It's not constant. I mean, if they felt constant pressure from the FTC or this or that, Senate subcommittee, or from sellers, or they, let's just say, felt like they were at risk of a class action lawsuit, there's no way they'd operate the way they do today. I mean, they clearly just don't feel that pressure.
Do you see them getting more lenient as time goes on, or more strict?
I would like to see them do some sort of amnesty program, which I equate with leniency in terms of, you did one thing wrong 3 years ago or 2 years ago. We banned you. We never let you back on. We ignored your appeals. We didn't professionally review your appeals. We're willing to give you another shot. It was your first time account suspension and you just didn't appeal properly. So in theory, you're available to appeal again. You just didn't, you got tired of it. You got frustrated. here's the door open to crack. I mean, not for counterfeiters, not for black hat sellers, not for fraudsters or abusers. Those people should be gone after one offense, and they should go, trouble some other platform, some other business. But I think in terms of leniency, Amazon should understand that a lot of sellers have been reinstated that shouldn't have been because they were up to no good and they're probably back doing no good. And the other side of that coin is a lot of legit sellers who just made some mistakes that were just poor performers or didn't understand policies the right way the first time deserve a second chance. That's where I kind of wanted to come up with this amnesty concept a couple of years ago. I don't know if that's going to happen. I think Amazon's trying to be more strict than lenient because it makes them look better for PR purposes to act like, hey, we're like maintaining, protect buyer experience. We're maintaining a strict environment for selling because we only want the best sellers. Easy to say, not as easy to accomplish.
Yeah. As of the airing of this, which I believe will probably be in August, once this goes out, we're essentially already halfway through Q3, give or take.
Yep.
So we're getting into the prime time of Amazonism. Like, it's no matter what you sell, it could be very relevant in Q4. It could be not relevant at all. Everyone still sees some kind of expanded exposure or sales or something along those lines. Yeah. How do you kind of coach these sellers to prepare ahead of time so that they don't end up with some kind of mistake in Q4 and get screwed for the season?
I mean, especially IP, abusive or fake IP complaints are rampant right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Lock down all your IP, register your trademark, don't sell your brand on Amazon until you've got brand registry and you've got your trademark all set up. Register copyrights, make sure that your images and any written text is copyrighted so that somebody else can't steal your would-be copyrighted images or info and claim it's theirs and that you're violating their copyright. That's a very, very common problem right now. We keep talking to brands that haven't really researched copyright, so they're selling their product before entering it into brand registry. Patents and designs is another heavily, heavily trafficked abuse path right now. So I'm not an attorney. I can't give legal advice. I would say if you run a reference for me for an IP attorney, I can give you one, but hire a top flight IP attorney, whether you get them from us or someone else, and make sure they know their stuff and make sure they lock all that down for you so that if anyone creates a fake infringement complaint and sends it to Amazon, you can knock it down pretty quickly and get your listing reinstated fast because we've seen so many horror stories during Prime Day, during Q4, during Black Friday, Cyber Monday, even before, where people just aren't prepared. They're not prepared to be attacked. They're not prepared for wild, inaccurate listing removals by Amazon itself.
Yeah.
But really just the anti-competitive abuse. I mean, this is a common problem. It should be understood by every brand that sells on Amazon or really anywhere online now. And I don't really think there's an excuse anymore for being ignorant of those things.
Yeah.
Because there's just too much money and greed at stake on Amazon. You can't afford not to be prepared. I'm not saying sit down right now and write an appeal to have it ready in advance for a fake copyright or a fake counterfeit complaint, but it's a good idea to have it outlined or, rough drafted just before peak season starts in Q4, especially counterfeit. I mean, if you can believe it, we work with brands that are being taken down. The listings are suspended for counterfeit complaints as if they're faking their own brand.
That's ridiculous.
You would think this is once out of every 3 months that we hear about this. I'd say it happens once a week or less, every 5 days.
Really? That's amazing.
Typically they wouldn't hire us. They're like, what do you mean we're faking? They try to appeal it themselves. This is a mistake. Please reinstate our listing. Gets rejected. We need more information. A lot of them are being asked for a letter of authorization from their supplier. So this is their manufacturer that they're being asked to provide an LOA. So it means nobody in Amazon's reading it. They don't understand the nature of it. Amazon itself, I can guess logically, is acutely aware that they are wrongfully suspending thousands of listings every day, every week for fake, inauthentic complaints about branded products or fake counterfeit reports. I mean, we look at the voice of the customer just the way you should as a brand. We look at return reasons just the way any brand owner should. And a lot of these complaints aren't, like, hey, the quality wasn't the same as last time, like as if you might have sold a bad batch. I mean, that might not be relevant, but at least you understand where it comes from. Or if it was like damaged in transit, hey, this isn't totally new. The last one I bought was new and it was damaged in transit. Well, you can kind of understand why the buyer said that. We don't see that. We see fake. It's just trigger words, right?
Yeah.
This is counterfeit. This is fake. This is inauthentic. Nothing else in the complaint. Obvious attack from a competitor or from whoever saying that you're faking your own brand. So Amazon itself should look at that and say, this is why are these guys constantly within a week, right? They know it's like a data cluster. So if you're being attacked by a competitor, they're going to hit you within a series of days. They're going to try to group it together, right? Not spread it out over months, because it loses all meaning if they do that. Yeah. Most black hats know how to attack you. Yeah. So, but Amazon should know, like, so he's had 0 counterfeit complaints in 9 months, and now we got 5 in 5 days. So, I mean, Amazon itself should know not to suspend your listing over something like that. That's where the idiocy of the lack of quality assurance really comes home. Yeah. Jeez. I know it's kind of dark clouds and storms ahead.
Exactly.
But if you're prepared,
like, this is great.
No, I mean, if you just consider this like fact of life stuff, the reality, we encourage people to not put their heads in the sand and to be realistic. And I know it sounds doom and gloom, but it really isn't if you just consider this a fact of life, the way Amazon currently manages the platform. If you're successful at all, expect to get some eyeballs on your brand and on your listings, and expect to get some absurd complaints, and expect to get some fake IP complaints. But just know that if you do it properly, you can reinstate those pretty quickly.
Yeah. Very good point.
Yeah. Silver lining's always there.
Yeah. Chris, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on the show. I obviously don't want to take up too much of your time. You're very busy.
That's all right. Now, if anyone has any questions, EcommerceChris.com. We've got a contact form there, or you can email support@EcommerceChris. But anything we talked about today, or any brand disruptions or attacks in Q4, especially when you need to react to that stuff quickly, just let us know. We'll take a look.
Yeah. And your socials all at EcommerceChris too, right? Mm-hmm. Saw you on TikTok the other day.
Yeah, I mean, the Facebook group is Amazon Seller First Class, but we've got the TikTok and the TikTok channel, and we've got Instagram, and
the whole nine.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm involved in 2 meetups for people in the Northeast. If you're on the East Coast or in the Northeast, we have a meetup in New York and in Boston now, so we're kind of alternating those. Oh, nice. It's exciting just to get back into we already did the Seller Velocity conference a couple of months ago, but getting into the in-person events has got us excited after 2 years, I should say, of not really going to anything except for Prosper Show.
Yeah.
And just going to Vegas over and over, which, Vegas is fine, but we like that we're getting into the regular flow of things with events again. So,
yeah. And I like that you're doing them elsewhere, because Helium 10's got theirs now. That's in September. Yeah. They're doing the Sell and Scale S3 Sell and Scale. Summit. It looks like it's going to be great, but I'm like, back in Vegas again. Great, here we go.
Yeah. So far for our conference for Seller Velocity, we've done it in a different city each year. So we're coming up on our 5th one, and we've alternated East Coast, West Coast. So I don't know if I can do that forever, but we'll see. Yeah. We're a long ways away from doing that in 2023, but. The most recent one was in Bend, Oregon, Central Oregon. So we liked mixing it up a little bit and having like networking activities outside. So we had like a snowshoeing event that was a networking event, just kind of combine those things.
Way to change it up.
That was awesome. Yeah. And drinking some wine, drinking some whiskey, and eating some, snacks out in the snow while talking about brand issues, appeal stuff. It was snowing off and on, but not so much so that you were just like covered in your coat or your hood. You could still have conversations, and you could still warm up by a fire. So we're probably going to do more stuff like that, those types of conferences where there's activities in the mountains, on the water, or whatever, and you have a lot of opportunity to discuss things with experts and listen to panels and stuff. It just might be outside, that's all. So.
Beautiful. Yeah. We'll keep an eye out for that. Great. But Chris, obviously, thank you so much for being on the show. Everyone who tuned in, thank you as well. Please make sure you do the usual: rate, review, subscribe on whichever podcast platform you want, YouTube, or just head over to ecommshow.com. But as usual, we will see you all next time. Thanks, and have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the E-Comm Show. Head over to ecommshow.com to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or on the BlueTuskr YouTube channel. The E-Comm Show is brought to you by BlueTuskr, a full-service digital marketing company specifically for e-commerce sellers looking to accelerate their growth. Go to BlueTuskr.com now for more information. Make sure to tune in next week for another amazing episode of the E-Comm Show.